Hi, this is part 2 of the Oak Trader report. I just wanted to put a chart up here. Texas Pacific Land Trust, a blast from the past. This stock was mentioned back in the day in Richard Wyckoff's book. I believe he sent researchers to Washington to check out the bankruptcy proceedings of the railway. These are the assets that the Texas Pacific Land inherited. It's one of the oldest land trusts and largest holders of land in the southwest part of America. And you can see the spike it's had, really up from about 92 all the way up to nearly 150. It really went parabolic. And you can see the beautiful consolidations here, moving up, the next step, and the uptrend becoming more pronounced, and now it's just gone parabolic. And I'll show you it on the monthly. You can see the beautiful flat line here, unrealized asset value somewhere, because they're not purchasing or buying any more land. They're not actively seeking to do business as such. Their job supposedly is to dispose of assets, although on their website I couldn't find any assets they wish to dispose. Whether it's the old Thai club, and you've got to know people to buy the assets from them, but I couldn't find anywhere on their website where it said contact us concerning our assets that we have for sale. And that's supposed to be their trust charter, that it says that their sole purpose is to dispose of assets. Of course, that has a wide remit, and it could take hundreds of years to dispose of these assets, and who knows what's lurking under the ground on some of their assets. But I do believe, looking at the price, it doesn't really matter how much unrealized value. It's gone from really 20 all the way up to nearly 150 in a very short space of time. And I would be very careful here. If you were long this particular stock, I'd be careful at the moment for wild swings and parabolic moves. This stock could carry right on up to maybe 200. Who knows? But what I do know is that it's very dangerous, and you should keep your eyes and your ears open, less so your ears. It can be very misleading reading anything to do with this particular stock. But you can see by the large price action spike here, to me that signals danger, that the market's coming to the end of a price cycle movement, and it's had an exceedingly good run over the years. This is the 1 year chart in Bitcoin, and you can see back in May, I talked about this before on a previous Bitcoin screencast. You can see the flat line and accumulation and steady buying, and then the upward trajectory of the move. Right now, to me, it looks like it's in a recovery phase. Who knows how long it's going to take to recover from this huge move up and downward spurt. And it does look to have some support around the 500 level, but again, I wouldn't be purchasing this. As I said in my previous Bitcoin screencast, I see Bitcoin as a medium of exchange between businesses and consumers, and business to business, and also a vehicle to transfer money around the world. I don't see it as something speculative. I know you can speculate on it, but I wouldn't personally, and I wouldn't here also, because I don't see very strong foundations like I saw here, say back in March or August or September. These are strong foundations being built, whereas now the foundations here are very flimsy. It could have a rise up from here, but it's very speculative, and it's just not my game anymore. I'd prefer to look for something like a stock or a commodity that had built solid foundations, and that I understood the market completely in terms of the speculating side of the market. I haven't got a clue what the real value of Bitcoins is worth, but I do know the usefulness of Bitcoins for the future in terms of trading, and I talked about it before in the previous podcast. The idea behind Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is very strong. There's nothing wrong with the ideology of Bitcoin. It's just going to take time to work out in terms of the players of the market, how they're going to offer and how the Bitcoin market's going to develop for the future. But again, I would not be trading this, as there's no solid foundations here. If it did flatten out in the future and more information came about, then potentially I could take a position. But I don't take positions in markets that don't really have strong foundations. And we're pretty much entering, well, it is the 5th year of the bull market. This is a 5-year weekly chart. You can see the low back in around March. I think it was the 9th day of March, if my memory serves me correctly. So we're almost at that anniversary point. Gann used to take a lot of credence in market anniversaries. I don't really understand what he was talking about there. It went a little bit above my head. But it is the 5th year of this bull market now, and probability would suggest at some point we are going to have a large correction. And I think if we did have the large correction, we could easily see it come down to 13.5, 13,000, and the market, if it did do that, would shake out a lot of participants. Again, I always look for the 45-degree trend line breaking in any uptrend, especially after it's had a broken uptrend and then it starts to conform to the trend again. When it next breaks the trend line, that's the danger signal to me. And obviously the wild swings in volatility, not so much on perhaps the Dow, even though it has had some wild swings, but I'm talking about individual stocks, and that's how I trade. It's very hard to sometimes predict what the Dow's going to do on a weekly or monthly basis. Longer term, it's much easier. But in terms of what it's going to do in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I always look to my individual stocks to make judgments from there, because it's a lot easier to read the market, and it's a lot more of a truer market, so to speak. But you can see here the market is still in that uptrend from here, but it's approaching that, and I wouldn't be surprised perhaps maybe to see that break that slightly, and we'll have to see where we go from here with the situation happening in Europe as well. This could add some detrimental shocks to the market. But again, is this just another stage in the bull market? Although the bull market probability wise suggests that it's going to come to an end quite soon, there's also on the other side of the coin nothing to suggest that this bull market perhaps couldn't go into the 6th year, especially with all that juice they're putting still into the market. And perhaps if things do deteriorate somewhat in Europe, there'd be more juice as well to come, and there'd be a lot of people trying to move money over to America, and perhaps American stocks would be not a wise place to park your money, but for some people they would consider that. So we may see streams of money coming into America as well, and that may not be enough to support the market totally, but it may be enough to strive off a huge correction. Yeah, these are just some interesting points concerning Gazprom. I was looking at them yesterday in the first broadcast on Sunday, and it took a dip, I believe, of around 13% today. Gazprom, and a lot of what they do in Russia, where they sell gas under cost to some Russian consumers as a social policy, is getting them into a lot of trouble. You know, it eats up a lot of their cash flow, and their main patrons in terms of where the gas goes as well. If Europe does decide not to accept Russian gas, which it could do, I think it could do that quite easily. I don't believe it's as difficult as a lot of these analysts are saying. That would shut off the income as well to Gazprom. But you can see here the type of idea behind Gazprom. It's owned it's a state-owned company basically, and above the state is Vladimir Putin. So really Gazprom is his personal corporate vehicle. I think that's a fair enough comment. And Gazprom only just recently bought Proof Media back in December. It's one of Russia's largest media outlets. It's almost like in America, ExxonMobil. I know there's a lot of large conglomerates in America that own media, but there's also a lot of alternative media in America as well. And I don't think some of the alternative media in America appreciate how difficult it is to be alternative media in Russia. You turn up for a demonstration, you get arrested. There's a climate of fear there, and when it comes to articles and putting out what your opinion is in Russia, you're put on a list. And I'm sure sometimes the same thing happens in Europe and America, but depending on what they do with that list, that's the difference. And if you look back over the last 10, 15 years, anyone that has a different voice to Putin has ended up in jail or dead. And that is a fact. You just look at the journalists that are linked to Putin in terms of criticising him, and you look at their fate over the last 10, 15 years, they haven't done too well. And these are the groups of companies they manage. And all this is owned by Gazprom now. Gazprom, it's pretty much like ExxonMobil owning all the media channels in Russia. And through Gazprom, as we know, who sits on the top of Gazprom? It's Vladimir Putin. And this is the details. Back in November 2013, Gazprom expanded its media interests. And these are just some little clips from the media in the last hour. It's coming up, I believe, to about 10:30, 11 American time in the morning on Monday. It's fallen to an all-time low against the dollar and the euro from Gazprom-owned Russian channel NTV. I'm sure they supply very independent-based reports on what's going on in the world, and I can pretty much see and understand why a lot of Russians have the same opinions. And this only happened a week and a half ago. This was the headline: billionaire Gleb Fistov is arrested, politics or revenge. A Moscow court has arrested billionaire political leader Gleb Fistov weeks after he ramped up his political ambitions by partnering up with prominent opposition figures and launching a new political party. History repeating itself with Kordosky. Although this guy is no Kordosky, he was just trying to fund the opposition to give Russian opposition a voice, and look what's happened to him. And that this has a history of happening with Vladimir Putin. Opponents are put in prison. Anyone that dissents against his opinion are either taken care of, they run away from the country, or they're arrested. The Russian central bank has sold up to $10 billion, that is, of foreign currency reserves. Supposedly, the central bank says the reserves stood at 493 billion, obviously trying to indicate that they have more than enough funds to keep the currency stable. But you just imagine if there was skirmishes now in the Crimea. This is just the beginning, potentially. How much have they actually got in terms of liquid cash? There's a big difference between what they say they have in reserves and reality. It's like Russia with its palladium deposits. It's a state secret, their palladium deposits are. And it's a little bit like some of the Chinese numbers as well. Do they really have 493 billion? If gas sales are cut off or cut 50%, it's going to be a massive difficulty for Russia to find that spare money. And also as well with the Russian ruble suffering as well, trying to keep the populace happy in terms of the ones that have got a taste of what it's like to live outside of Russia won't be easy. Russia's central bank has sold up to 10 billion or 2% of its gold and foreign exchange reserves to stem the ruble's fall today. All this could have been focused on building Russia up, developing it into a modern country, somewhere that Russians can feel proud of and actually show the world why Russia is a great country, instead of constantly talking about what a great country is. They could go on and make a great country, but again, it looks like most of the attention is being diverted to wasting the Russian people's money. Basically, that's what it comes down to. They're saying that 58 billion has been wiped off the stock market, the MySex, since Friday, more than Russia spent on the Olympics in Sochi. You know, a few more days like this and they might start listening to opinions, and they might start looking at what they're doing and seeing what a massive gamble it is. I mean, everyone's saying that Putin knows that the West is not going to act. It will all be bark and no bite. But if there is a bite in terms of sanctions, Russia's gamble is not going to look too tactical. Everyone's saying what a great tactical move this is by Putin. I really don't think they understand, you know, how the global economy or the global system works. And at the moment, you know, Russia's just like a sponge. It's being squeezed, and if it carries on, it's going to be squeezed even harder. And Putin's like a hedge fund trader that's just taken one of the biggest gambles of his life, and he's doubled down in the Crimea. And if this carried on, then those reserves could soon disappear pretty quickly. This was from the AFP talking about the MICEX. At one point the main index was down 13.5%. The smaller one, I believe, 11.94%. These are big moves. Gazprom was down a whopping, I think, 13% at one point. The ruble, because of the interest rate rise by the Russians, 1.5% in the morning, panicking, raising their interest rates. If they hadn't have done that, the ruble would have been absolutely hammered today. But as it is, it's still been hammered, and it's at the lowest level against the US dollar for a long time. So things aren't looking good for Russia. You know, Putin needs to pull back, or at least put a plan in place for the troops to leave Crimea. Okay, that's it for now, and I'll be uploading tape reading and market tactics part 3 a bit later on today. Okay, have yourself a good day, take care, bye for now.